Good morning. It's so good to see all of you today. My name is Malcolm Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral. I'm glad that you're all here today. Every year, the Cathedral chooses a special theme to reflect on through the course of the year. And in 2020, we knew that it was going to, that we were having the anniversaries of women's suffrage, African American suffrage, the United Nations. We were having important elections during 2020. And so we were thinking, like, what would be appropriate in that setting? And we decided that this year would be the year of bridges. So we're talking about reconciliation, how to build bridges across divides with people who may be different from us. Our guest today has an interesting story to tell about bridging the divide between the secular and the religious, and about the divides in Israel today. He is the head of the recently formed Ritual Center at the Shalom Hartman Institute, a leading center of Jewish thought and education. He's one of the founders of Beit Tefilah in Israel, Beit Tefilah Israeli. Israeli, a secular synagogue in the heart of Tel Aviv, and he spent a year at the European Institute of Jewish Studies in Stockholm as scholar in residence. Please join me in welcoming Rani Jaeger. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to have you. And Rani was telling me earlier, before we came on stage, that he's just traveled 15 hours from Israel. And so we're going to help him to not get hurt during his jet lag.
Thank you.
Yeah, our hearts go out to you. It's a long way from home.
It's a long way. It's the other side of the world.
It is the other side of the world, it's true. But it's a smaller world than it was when we were children.
It's true.
So tell me a little bit about what your growing up life was like. What was your childhood like, and how did it prepare you for your adulthood? What were your parents like, and what were their influences on you?
It's a wonderful question, and you know that you're prepared only in retrospect.
Right, exactly.
Right?
That's
when you're a kid, you
Yeah.
look at it and you say, oh, what's going on here?
Exactly, because history is lived forward and understood backwards. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if we're fortunate, we at a certain moment we understand that there was something there, but only
Yes.
when we are grown-ups. So as a child, I grew up in Tel Aviv, which is a very secular city. On the term secular, I think we could spend some time because it's a little bit different from here, probably.
I did have questions about that. Maybe you could explain that for us and then tell us about...
Can I tell the story?
Yeah, whenever you can.
All right.
Whatever order
I started
the
with the
best.
story,
Yeah.
It's like, I feel comfortable with stories. So I grew up in a household to my parents. My father is a physicist and my mother is a literature teacher. So you start to understand the gap, right? He's from the sciences and she is from humanities. But that's only the least. My father, when he wrote his PhD in physics, it turned out that he started to believe in God through physics, very much influenced by Einstein. It was a very individualistic process. There was nothing around him in those times, Israel, it was a very strange bird, this kind of process of a person through science who's becoming religious, Orthodox, Jewish Orthodox religious. And so this is my father. I grew up to a family where he was already observant and Orthodox.
Yeah.
And my mother is as secular as you can think of. Not only that she doesn't observe, the commandments in her perception of herself, God simply doesn't play any role in her life. She wouldn't say, like in Hebrew, some people would say, Baruch Hashem, thanks God, right?
Yeah.
She wouldn't say, since she is a literature teacher and she respects words, she would never say that because that would be like a desecration of vocabulary, of language. So that was the household I grew up in. And you can understand it's quite challenging because you kind of, especially in Israel of those times, the definition between the religious and the secular was very clear. It was sort of a Berlin Wall.
Yes.
And even different school systems. Okay, there is a secular school system, what might be called here a public school system, and a religious school system. And I went to the public school system. But then my father was Orthodox. So, for a child, always to be between the worlds, between the discourses, between places where it's trivial to believe to places where it's simply out of context to believe,
Right.
and where God is something that is almost ridiculed at.
Right, right.
So that's where it started.
Oh, that's great. And so what did you learn from each of your parents in terms of just, like, how did they form you and shape you?
It's sort of a therapy.
I forgot to tell you, you don't have to answer any of the
No,
questions
of course,
you want to.
no, it's okay. I mean, this
I
is
tell
also
all the
your
guests.
job,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's part of your.
Well, you're such an interesting person. We want to hear from you.
So, again, in retrospect, I think what I got from my father is, first of all, the power of prayer.
Yeah.
I think since then, I've been watching many people pray from different religions, and I think until today, he's my kind of example of a person who is genuinely praying, not doing the ritual, not doing what you have to do, but standing in front of God and praying. Even when he's leading a prayer, then you feel that of course he cares about the community he's leading, but then he's not a priest or anything. He's just a regular.
Yeah.
But then you also feel that there is some sort of I don't know, communication, but an attempt for communication.
Right.
So
right.
that I took from him, I think, until today, and that's why I'm also very excited to be here, to experience other traditions of prayer.
Right. Exactly.
Which I think every one of these traditions have something meaningful to tell us.
Right.
And from my mother, I think I took this sincerity, with all the existentialism and Albert Camus, all the philosophers that try to live a life with no God around.
Right, right. Authentic.
Yes, without that word that would sometimes create problems, but many times also give meaning and explain things. And since it doesn't work for her, it's not. So I think I really learned from her how to live an authentic secular life.
Right.
In that dialogue with the religious world.
Right, right. And I can imagine growing up, you wouldn't have any idea what effect this was all going to have. But in retrospect, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
How did you decide what to study? Like, how did you decide on what your doctoral thesis was going to be? Even just like your just general direction. I mean, you could obviously have gone the physics direction, or you could have gone the humanities direction.
Sure. That's the problem when you want to, as an adolescent, you want to rebel against something.
Right.
Can you imagine? I can't rebel in any
exactly.
way. Every way that I take is already taken.
It's true. Every road. Exactly.
So my rebellion was to try to find the middle way.
Yeah.
Not the middle way in the sense that it's a consensual way, or I would say a mediocre way, I hope.
Right.
But some sort of a different path. So, but to your question, again, I am a believer, and I can't say exactly, I mean, it's not like a final theology or credo. But in retrospect, I can say that in the army I was a commander of medics corps. So I wanted to become a physician, which didn't really turn as I wanted it to be. So I decided I will study Jewish philosophy and history in the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And I had this strange notion that after 1 year in the humanities, they will let me into medical school. Now, everybody has to laugh, because of course it didn't happen. Who would care in medical school that I've studied few pages of Plato or whatever, right?
Right.
But the truth is, this is why I'm sitting here today. The truth is also why, that I fell in love with that.
Yeah.
I felt in love with my religious tradition that I knew, not enough about when I entered this study department, and with history, and somehow my path led me to the things that I'm doing now. And again, in retrospect, you can say, wow, we could have known that had we met you then.
Right.
But I was completely, there was a way that I would run away from all of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is how it turned out.
I love the way you describe your life as kind of a
Via Dolorosa.
Well, via media.
Oh.
I mean, it's a middle way. I mean, Anglicanism, like when we are talking about our own faith, that's how we describe ourselves. We're not Roman Catholic. We're not strictly Protestant. We're kind of both. But I wonder just how that middle way, I mean, because it is, you have a very bridge building role in society,
Yeah.
and just how naturally that comes to you, what kind of challenges that introduces for you. Sometimes it's, I think, hard for others to understand because they may see you as one or another. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about that, just middle way, because I do think it's a really, in our society now, the internet makes it easier for us to hear from more extremes. And what is the future and the hope for people of the middle way?
I totally agree with the challenge.
Yeah.
I think we are in a time where the extremes are more appealing.
Yeah.
It's partly social media, but also other processes. And I'm genuinely trying to find for myself. First, I have to say things that I do started as a way for my own benefit. You can say I wasn't trying to convert anyone. I was trying to find a solution for my own way of living. And there was something about it that attracted other people as well.
Right.
Which is fantastic if you find that you're trying to pave a way and along the way you find other people joining. It means that it's not only your own issue that you're trying to not resolve but somehow to recreate. It means that other people are looking for that as well. And I think Israeli society, again, there is the ultra-Orthodox, the Orthodox, and the very clearly secular people, secular Jews.
Yeah.
I mean, from the Jewish part of Israeli society. But in between, there are many people that are socially defined as secular. I mean, they would send their kids to a public school. They would, some of them really resent some sort of, any sort of government religious establishment. They dislike it completely. We spoke about it before, right? They wouldn't like to get married in the strictly governed way of like the government tell you.
Yeah.
They wouldn't follow the Jewish law in a full package. At the same time, many of these people, when you ask them in a secret way, because it's also something very personal, they would say, well, I believe in God, for sure. God has meaning in my life. I talk with him. I talk to him. It's very interesting to see how many people are, when you scratch something and you give the right context, and this is part of the things that we're trying to do in this community, then it comes up.
Right.
And people are more relaxed to talk about the middle way, and then they don't have to announce when they enter the community that I'm leading with a few friends, I believe in that or I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
They don't have to sign on a, to
Right.
tick a box.
Yeah.
Come, we're praying. Would you like to join us?
Yeah.
And we're telling you, we don't expect you to become more religious. Come as you are.
Right.
And come out as you came in, if that's good for you. We would love you to come more inspired, more questioning maybe.
Right.
And also questioning about God is part of our community and part of our liturgy sometimes.
Right. I mean, it's funny. I mean, our two communities may have more in common with each other than,
Than it
churches
seems.
in San Francisco or synagogues in Tel Aviv.
I think it's not completely coincidental. Also, Tel Aviv, is the hub of high-tech industry in Israel. It's the hub of the liberal group, the main liberal group of Israel. And there are many similarities to the Bay Area in that respect.
Yeah.
So established religion is something that people would, move away from in that respect, which is government and establishment.
Right.
And politics,
Yeah.
all right, in the partisan sense. They don't like it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to their own journey in life, and let's say to the life cycle events,
Right,
or to
right.
the calendar, and when the Hebrew New Year will come, they would look for something to give meaning to to this moment.
Yeah.
And when a baby is born, they would like to do something which connects them back to their tradition, but to do it also in a way that is
Right.
somehow, that fits who they are,
Yeah.
and not negates who they are.
Right, on a personal, there's kind of this personal and there's this political element.
Yes.
And it's trying to still nurture that personal element. Because I do believe we're all spiritual beings.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's just like, it's like what we're wired to be. And it is important to create spaces which can nurture all people of all sorts of spiritualities. But maybe you can talk a little bit about just like becoming a rabbi. I mean, like rabbinical school.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that journey.
That's a serious question.
It is
a serious
Yeah.
question, because that was a moment for me that I had to be serious.
Yeah.
I was doing this community work for almost 15 years, which we started with friends as a startup. We're not part of any denomination. We are on our own.
Yeah.
Okay. And at a certain moment, the institute in which I work at, the Hartman Institute, with collaboration with another institute, interesting secular institute in Israel, Oranim College, they wanted to establish a new rabbinical school. And the people who are also my colleagues were leading it.
Yeah.
And they said, Rani, you should come in. I mean, this is for you. This is who you are.
Yeah.
And I scratched my head and I said, but I can't.
Yeah.
What will my mother say?
Right, exactly.
No, seriously.
Yes, you're so right.
She felt I was hijacked by the others.
Right.
Okay? It was a serious moment of
Yeah.
discussion between us. And I have to tell you that in the first rounds of discussions that we had there, like in every group, everyone say why they came. So they asked us, would you give like a list of associations to the word rabbi for you?
Right.
And I have to tell you, with my father, which you understand I love very much, and
Yes.
with other wonderful rabbis that I have had during my lifetime, including late Rabbi David Hartman, who established the institute I work, and I was completely, influenced by him. Yet with all of them, with all of these people, what I wrote was a white man with a beard,
Yes, exactly.
that tells me what to do, and I don't want to do it.
Right, completely. Yeah, that's in us.
The resentment to coercion
Right.
was so deep.
Yeah.
It even surprised me, the answer. I was willing to, of course, everyone we were very open.
Yeah.
So that is just to tell you that being in this program was not a trivial move for me. Because not only for my mother, for myself, I was wondering if that was not a betrayal of something that I was doing before.
Right.
Kind of not being the establishment.
Yes.
Being the spiritual, but not, with a title.
Right.
And all of that, which I felt was the right thing to do, because I was, as an Israeli, as a Jew, I was fed up with all of that.
Yeah.
But they convinced me.
They convinced you.
They convinced me, and I want to describe, if that's okay, a little moment of conviction. Why?
Definitely.
I sat with a family at our office. She was a mother to a bar mitzvah boy, 13-year-old boy that was about to become bar mitzvah, reading from scripture, and I'm sure many of you know it. And we're in Israel, so everything is less polite than here.
Yeah.
All right, so we're in a meeting, and the phone rings, and her iPhone or the smartphone rings, and of course in Israel she answers the phone.
Yeah.
Had it been here, you would say you wouldn't answer.
Right,
You say
right.
you would shut it off. And so she. This is from our generation. I wanted to say she lifted the phone, but actually that's not what people do anymore. So she answered the call, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. I'm with my rabbi." And we continued the conversation, and suddenly I understood that running away from this title would actually be betrayal is a big word.
Yeah.
But she was expecting me to be her rabbi.
Right.
She was expecting me to bear the title for her boy, for her family, for the guests who came. And I was listening to this as part of my inner conversations, and I said, look, there is here a whole community of people who are, it's not only personally me, they are saying something about their identity.
Right.
That, with all due respect, that for all the sociologists in Israel, they are called secular. They still want a rabbi.
Yeah.
They are secular religious.
Right. Right.
They are hyphenated people.
Yeah.
And it struck me that instead of escaping from standing at that hyphen between the secular and the religious, I should stand on that hyphen.
Yes.
And I should play that role.
Right.
And I should do the best that I can to serve
It's a powerful symbol. I mean, there's times when I'm in the grocery store and I'm talking to someone, I can tell from the look on their face, I'm like, oh, that's right, I'm wearing a collar. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, because I'd forgotten that I was a priest at that moment, but they don't forget. And you're right, it is a very powerful symbol, and it's frightening because it can be so badly misused.
It can be, and it's misused so many times.
And it is, exactly.
So I think the question for many of us is whether to leave this word for someone else, and to say, well, I don't want anything with these words, with these holy words in general, by the way.
Yeah.
And of course, the top word is God.
Right.
Or we want to reclaim it.
Yes.
We want to give it a new meaning. We want these words, these holy words in our lives, but they have also to fit themselves into our lives as much as we fit ourselves into.
And that's about the past. I mean, what part of it is not letting one particular faction own the entire past, because it's everybody's past.
Exactly.
It's the past for all the secular people. It's the past for the ultra-Orthodox. And it's not like one group can claim it as just their own.
Exactly. I think that's a very deep feeling by many secular Israelis, that Jewish tradition cannot be owned by one particular stream, even though we respect that stream, and I respect that stream.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, that's my father.
Right, exactly.
Okay, as I described before, I have, not only I love him, but also I have great respect to the way that he is walking in the world as an Orthodox religious Jew.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm not that one.
Yeah.
So while respecting that, I want to create my own way of doing it.
Right, exactly. So what was rabbinical school like? Like, what were your favorite classes or your favorite teachers? I mean, did it have an impact on you in terms of, or was it just something that you kind of had to go through the steps through the?
Well, I was privileged to be in the first cohort.
Oh, that's great.
That
is great.
That's
so you
the
kind
best.
of set the form.
We kind of made it together.
Yeah.
And it was great efforts and also great inspiration.
Yeah.
One of the features of this program is that it sits together Orthodox, Reform, strange birds like me, conservative, all kinds of people from different rabbinical, affiliations or Jewish affiliation, and we say, after all, we do want to serve the public as a whole.
Right.
And for me, the striking thing was to understand that sometimes they can solve some issues of my people, and sometimes I can solve problems of their people if they can't solve it.
Right.
I have all kinds of stories. There is a couple that I officiated their marriage because their rabbi couldn't, because he was restricted by the laws of his denomination.
Exactly.
And vice versa.
Right.
So the understanding here that we can disagree, and we disagree on things, and at the same time we can and must cooperate for the well-being of society, instead of always just, what's usually happening is that people are fighting. That was an amazing.
Yeah, that is an amazing thing. I totally agree. We have, when we do, you're pretty much almost all the denominations require you to do hospital chaplaincy. Mm-hmm. And in that setting, you're almost always with just a tremendous variety, religious variety. And we learn so much from each other. And it's a blessing. It's like kind of a surprise that you become part of this community of rabbis, and you learn from them, and you make your contribution too.
Absolutely.
What was it like starting a synagogue? I have two friends who started a church, and they're the most interesting people to talk to, because it's so different than normal churches, and they can talk about how they made all these decisions about what to do and how to be. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think It took me a while to understand that liturgy is an issue, what to do, what not to do, to pick your things. We've introduced a lot of modern poetry, Hebrew poetry into our liturgy because we feel that's the vocabulary that we need. Like we have some and that.
Right.
So in between we stand.
Yeah.
So I can elaborate on that, but I think one of the crucial issues it took us a while to understand is community.
Yeah.
How do you create a community in this secular, liberal context where there is so much around and so many attractions?
Yeah.
And there is also something in the liberal mindset which is very individualistic.
Yes.
And convince people to come on a regular basis to a certain home, to a certain venue, and to do things together. I mean, that's exactly what we're the opposite of.
Right.
This is, I mean, when I have a weekend, they would say, why would I go to a building to do the same thing with the same people every...
Yeah.
This is like bizarre. Let me do, I don't know.
Right.
Or...
I'll go on the golf course. Or
yes. or I will meditate.
I'll walk on the beach by myself.
I will walk on the beach by myself.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, we spoke a little bit before on the tremendous work that you do here with, still there is a need for community.
Yeah.
And maybe even more so.
Right.
In big cities, where people come and, enter their apartments and then what?
Yeah.
And then, and it's true for all levels, for all ages, from the younger ones to the older ones.
Yeah.
So how to create a community around the spiritual tradition?
Right.
I think that's the big
and
challenge.
without also, I guess if you were in one form of religious faith, then you basically say, God disapproves of you if you're not doing what I say, and so you're never going to fall back on that kind of position. So it's almost like you have to teach very. When I say liberal, I mean like in the classical sense, like Kant. Dare to be enlightened.
Yes.
You form your own opinion of things. Don't listen to some authority. In liberal, in that sense, you're right. It's hard to understand like why community might be important.
Yes,
but ritual, I agree. That's like another thing I thought of because like there's all sorts of things. I mean, you probably have to think of like a governance structure. That might be kind of a complicated thing. But how did you think about liturgy and ritual? I mean, like, did you begin with a template from another?
Yeah. I mean, From the first day, we wanted to relate to Jewish tradition.
Yeah.
So we were looking for an Israeli, Jewish way, modern way, and also traditional way, again, secular, religious, to perform these rituals.
Yeah.
That many of them we loved. I mean, some of us grew on these rituals.
Right.
And we loved the tunes and the words and all of that. But we were looking for ways to make them, not to leave them.
Right.
But not to have them fixed.
Yeah.
And actually, in the first weeks or years of our congregation, of our synagogue, we didn't even have a book. We had a binder.
Right.
Where the pages could have come in and out every week.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we became Orthodox, and now we have a book. and I know people will fight with us in a very short time that we should open the book again and go through the process of choosing and selecting and adding and taking out.
Yes.
Because as a child, I have to tell you, one of the things that was the hardest for me is on the Day of Atonement, on Yom Kippur, when the liturgy book is like bigger than like an encyclopedia.
Yes.
And I was counting the pages.
Right.
Until it ends. And and it was very hard for me to be there.
Yeah.
So I think one of our issues is not only to add, but also to select in a way that would keep the spirit of our spirit, and also that it will have some sort of integrity with tradition.
Right.
So that's one of the things that we do that happened to us coincidentally is that we were looking for a place to pray.
Right, exactly. Must be a story.
It was a story.
Yeah.
We had a synagogue from the United States, Bnei Jeshurun from the Upper West Side in New York. They're very good friends of us. They were coming for a visit, and we were looking for a place to do it.
Yeah.
Under all kinds of circumstances connected to the domination of Orthodoxy in Israel, we couldn't find a space that would host us. I won't go into this whole mess, but
it
there
sounds
is,
terrible,
well.
Yeah.
So we were trying to find a place, and we were negated place after place, and then we got to the port of Tel Aviv. It's a wonderful open venue in front of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
The sea is there,
Yeah.
the sun is descending to, that's the time of when we receive the
Right, the
Sabbath.
sun,
Wow, the
yeah.
sun. I said, perfect.
Yeah.
Could we have it here? So we knocked on the door of the officials there, and we said, could we do something out? Well, we can do.
Right.
They were looking on us because, again, what are you? Secular, religious?
Which box do you fit in?
Yeah, exactly. Had we asked for a space for a party, for a hip-hop thing,
Yes.
they would know. But what is this? Are you praying outside? What sort of people are you?
Yeah.
So, but they said, all right, do it. And we did, and it was bizarre for us as well, because you're so used to go into a building. Suddenly we were there.
Yeah.
But we had something which is the best for religion, and that is nature,
Yes, I agree.
right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine to receive the Sabbath in a hall with no,
Right.
or to receive it when the sun descends into the Mediterranean and there is a sunset, and we sing about the sunset, and it's there.
It's there, exactly.
So we were there. We were completely up in the air. Wow,
Oh,
it
yeah,
was so
exactly.
inspiring. And people with bathing suits started to join us.
Yeah, that's great, exactly.
And that's also something that you get religion into the marketplace. That
Yeah.
instead of being in a museum,
Right.
we took it out.
Right, exactly.
So for the next week, the port authority officials, they said, you know what? Why don't you be here the whole summer? And we'll pay for your, loudspeaker, for the
Right,
old,
that sound
because
becomes
for the sound and everything. And we've been there for over 10 years
Oh,
already.
that's great,
July
yeah.
and August. If
Yeah.
you please do visit Israel.
Yeah.
And if you visit during the summer, join us. There
Yeah.
are 1,000 people there, 800 to 1,000 people
Yeah.
there, singing together and celebrating together, and it's a really spiritual moment. By the way, that people from different denominations can join.
Right. It's easier to fit in
It's
a place
easier
like
to
that.
fit in because
Yeah.
there is no sign.
Right.
The sun is not orthodox, liberal, reform, or it's like the sea
Right.
is
Yeah.
the
The sky belongs to all
Yeah.
of us.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love it. So you must have connections with other synagogues around the world who are doing the same project. And what do you learn from them? And then what do you think you have to teach them from your setting?
So first I have to say, we would, and this is like, thank you, San Francisco.
Yeah.
Seriously. In the journey to create Beit Tefilah Israeli, the journey started here.
Wow.
We were the founders. We were a part of a group that was funded then by the Jewish Federation of San Francisco. It was geared towards promoting Jewish pluralism in Israel, and we visited San Francisco and New York.
Wow.
And the religious possibilities that we've seen here and in New York transformed our mindset. We've seen here people that were not waiting for the minister.
Right.
Government,
Yeah.
not ministers, or for the culture, whatever. They were, this is like, you're doing it.
Doing it, yeah.
You want a different spiritual path? Create it. Don't wait for someone else to do it for you.
Yeah.
And we were exposed to a school here, and again to Bnei Joshua in New York, and I still remember we came out of those places and we said, whoa, we need that back home.
Right.
It's a little bit far away to fly every week for
Yeah.
a service to San Francisco.
Right, exactly.
Even though it would be nice. And also I have to tell you, speaking of learning something, one of the most striking advices that we got from Rabbi Rolly Matalon from BJ was, don't dare to copy-paste San Francisco or New York to Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
You have to create your own language.
Right.
Because you're doing it all in Hebrew, and you're native Hebrew speakers, and you're in the Middle East,
Yeah.
which is also important. The music is different.
Right, of course.
You
yeah.
can't have it all like
Yeah, like
You
the
know,
Beatles.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's part of our tradition, but
Yeah.
for so many of us, part of our tradition, I'm also both, right?
Right.
From East and West. So it's also Turkish music and Arabic music and sitar as
yeah,
much as
right.
organ. You know,
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
so we are there in the Middle
Yeah.
East. We can't do copy-paste. We have to develop our own language.
Yeah.
So speaking of learning, this is something that we actually, thank you, San Francisco.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love that too, because here you are, you're back here and you're teaching us. And well, you'll be teaching us at the 11 o'clock service today. But it is a blessing, because I totally agree with you that it has to be true to the place that it's in. And sometimes we're not clear about it, because it's hard for us to see, because it's almost like we don't recognize the water that we're swimming in, because
Sure.
it's so part of us already.
It's so part of us, and there is something, when you see something powerful, spiritually powerful going on, you simply want to take it and bring it home.
Exactly.
Like a sort of a consumer moment.
Yeah.
But this is no consumering moment,
Yeah.
right? You can't buy spirituality. That's the beauty and the challenge of it.
Yeah.
You have to create it.
Right, and you have to create a context, and then you hope that that's going to be what happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I love hearing about it, because it's just. And how does a governance work in terms of just? Do you know what I mean by that? Do you have like a governing board? Like how did you figure that part out?
We're still figuring it out.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'll be
Maybe
happy
that's
to hear.
That might be a tough question. I
No,
know.
it's not a tough question. I mean, look, one of the things that we understood very quickly is that you have to start understanding, I mean, you have to create liturgy and community, and also we have to understand how to govern how to run a community and fundraising and all the
Right, who
real
decides what
stuff.
color
Who
the
decides what?
carpet's
Yeah,
gonna be,
sure.
and-
So all
yeah.
this is part of, when you're in a startup,
Yeah.
even making the coffee is
Right,
part
right,
of
yeah.
something that you have to decide.
Yeah.
So we're over 15 years old, but in a way we're still there.
Yeah. Exactly.
kind of doing that.
No, it's such an important part of it all.
And we don't have a venue, which is also a challenge. Where? What?
Right.
So-
I mean, there's a lot of like very large megachurches in North America that basically go from place to place.
Yeah.
And I imagine that
We might.
there's advantages to that too.
Of
I mean,
course.
one of the advantages that you just, it's hard to be in a small church which has a lot of seating and
And
not many people
sure.
coming. And it's nice to be in a place that matches the size of your
Yes.
congregation.
Which is hard to find sometimes.
Yeah. We've been thinking so much about Israel this last week, with the president's
Yes.
peace proposal. And I wonder if you can, you're right. I mean, it's the other side of the world.
Mhm.
And yet what happens in Israel is so important to us in California. And I wonder if there's anything you can tell us about just, that we don't already know, or what things are not obvious to somebody from San Francisco about what the situation is like for Palestinians and Israelis.
I'll start with connecting it to what we talked just before. And that is, whenever we do something, especially in the public sphere, like at the port, we're insisting all the time on talking and praying for peace.
Yeah.
Because there is a need for spiritual preparation for peace.
Yeah.
One of the flaws of previous attempts to get peace, to achieve peace with the Palestinians, I think it was like a leader's thing. And where are the people? And I think what is so hard to see, also with my kids, is people don't believe in the word anymore.
Mm. Yeah.
They don't believe that it's a viable, not once, like the lamb and the wolf will dwell together. I don't speak about that kind
Yeah.
of peace, which is,
Yeah, eschatology.
Eschatology.
Yeah.
No, right now,
Yeah.
moderately, people living together without killing each other in a respectful way.
Yeah.
Okay? And I can tell you, I'll relate to your question on the ground level, but I want to say spiritually, one of the things that has been troubling for me for so long is that the word lost its relevance.
Mm.
People would say the conflict, but they would not talk about peace.
Yeah.
And we have been reiterating, and you can say, what's the meaning of a ritual in the Tel Aviv port? You can say that, of course, and I'm not imagining that I'm transforming Israeli society and the whole mindset. But the fact that every Friday we're there and insisting of saying it and singing and praying for peace and again and again. And also whenever we can, we do an interfaith prayer for peace where we bring a Muslim clergy and a Christian clergy, and we pray for peace together, and people see that, not only talk, not only, I don't know, hear, but participate in a moment of praying for peace. And that's the power of ritual. I mean, it's not only from here. It's something, if it's good, that you live through this ritual. And so that's also very important to start with.
Right.
You're asking about the plan, the deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the secondary question. The first question is like just what I said, is just like, what do we not know? And you're right, there is a way in which leaders function and try to make treaties, but there is a more interpersonal level too, which is important. And that's not going to happen unless we are transformed ourselves.
Sure.
And we have to be peaceful people before the setting can be.
And this is something so that I mean, we need to understand, in the Middle East, tradition is not something that you can overlook. The past is the present in the Middle East. Okay? I spoke once with a person from Macedonia. You know, a country, they had like a quarrel now with Greek about the name, Macedonia, because the Greeks said, Macedonia, it's us. And they said, no, it's us. And he said, and we were in Europe somewhere, people from Scandinavia, and he said, no one understands me. I said, I understand you. It's like mythologies and archaeology live where you live. And it's also true, it's certainly true for Jerusalem. And so I think one of the things that is a big question and also a big challenge is, how do we make those traditions from a place of explosion to a potential place of healing? And that's a long journey, that's a long journey. But there are little seeds of hope there, of religious people, Muslims and Jews, talking to each other. Because before that, in the mid-90s, Oslo, that attempt was kind of, it was even symbolic, and I was for Oslo, so I have to say, I wasn't against it.
Right.
But even the name of the pact is somewhere in Norway.
Right.
It's somewhere not somewhere. It's like in Scandinavia.
Exactly,
So it's symbolic in the fact that it was needed to go out from the Middle East. I understand that, but I mean symbolically, we have to find a way to make our traditions, and it's my duty as a Jew. I can't say to the Muslims, you should do it. They should do it. I'm not preaching to them.
Right.
Dealing with their own tradition is their duty.
Right.
My duty is to deal with my tradition and to find ways that it could, be a force for peace and reconciliation. And it's not easy, because we're fighting on the same sacred spaces and sacred places and on some of the narratives that are colliding. But I see, I think I smell, or I hope I smell, a hope that these traditions can be a part of the solution and not only a part of the problem.
Yeah, and that's a big question. I mean, and it's so important to be. I mean, in a way, it's wrapped up in with the whole founding of this movement. It's trying to come up with a connection to tradition that'll draw out peace, and yet not the modern politics that are dividing.
Yes, and there was an expectation, to have, when you enter the room in previous years, you should have kind of put away your religious garment or your traditional garment. Come as as a human, as a human being. This universal human being. But unfortunately, or fortunately, there is no universal human being, in the sense that every one of us is a product and a carrier of a certain tradition that we love and that we respect and that we would like to follow. So if you want me to make peace with you and you expect me to leave myself out of the door to do it, it wouldn't work, and also for you, I guess. So we have to find a way not to leave our identities out of the door, but to bring them in and to have sort of a dialogue.
John Rawls is an American philosopher who wrote a book called The Theory of Justice. And
Yeah.
his idea is that there's people in the original position, like imagining not knowing what your social place would be in society and what kind of society would you structure. And the biggest problem with it is exactly, we can't conceive of a human being that isn't, so culturally determined and so, invested already. It's not like we're not neutral parties in anything.
We're trying, by the way, at Hartman to create for Israeli kids. In Israel, there are Muslims and Jews and Christians. We're trying to create a pivotal program which get principals and teachers to have the kids sit together and read from the Quran, from the Bible, and from the New Testament, and to be exposed to different, to other traditions with a hope that would create an understanding and respect to the other, who might be your neighbor.
Right, exactly. I love that. One of our traditions we have at Grace Cathedral is we take questions. So people have note cards, and they write down their notes, and Rebecca collects the questions, and then I read them to you. In some of the material they gave me before I was preparing, it talked a little bit about an institute that supports, it has to do with Muslims in America, or Muslims.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, Hartman has a magnificent program for Muslim leadership, American Muslim leadership, that comes in order to understand, again, who are we?
Right.
And what are our traditions? And of course, it doesn't erase some of the reality on the ground is also exposed, and the reality is not always nice.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard. But in order to create, it's in the light of what I told you before. In order to create another reality, we have to know each other.
Yeah, exactly. Can you share some ways your community is together, either fathers or shares projects and activities outside of the weekly service? Thank you for your important work, ! And they underlined thank you.
So should I answer one by one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what do you do outside of worship?
Yeah. So study, of course.
Yeah.
And that's also interesting because people really want to know, like the process that I went through. They wanted to open the holy books and the new books and to understand without someone, just read. And so that's something that we do. And we also try to connect the ritual with some sort of social action. So a few years ago, let's say, we did a Passover Seder for refugees from Sudan who were fleeing to Israel.
Yeah.
And we had them sit, we invited them to sit around a big table. We served them.
Yeah.
And they told the stories of coming out of
dangerous situations.
Of slavery.
Yeah, slavery.
So that's an example of things that we try to do during the year, and to connect the ritual with social action, with social activism.
Yeah. What would be your cherished outcome for your new congregation and your country, and how do you make that happen?
Whoa.
They're not easy ones.
Oh, no. Serious questions. If we could contribute to the creation of a more democratic, open, tolerant, and yet happy, tradition-grounded Israeli Judaism, I would say I've done my share.
Yeah, exactly. And then what about on more of a national or regional level?
I'm not a politician, and yet I know how much the spiritual and the religious, again, because what I said before, if we would be a vehicle, to remind the importance of peace and the ability to make peace, and the duty that it sheds on us to pursue it, and not to leave it, I'd be happy also.
Oh gosh, how might oh, this is really impossible for me to read. How might I just can't read that word. Okay. Mysticism. How might mysticism
It's mysterious.
and place connect? It's also like the blue ink. I'm getting older and my eyes aren't as good. So how might mysticism and place connect? And peace. Oh, it's mysticism and peace.
Mysticism.
What is the connection? How could they connect?
You know, it's interesting because some of the pivotal works that were done in connecting Muslims and Jews were done by people who are mystical scholars, or because there is something maybe in that chapter in those two traditions that is more capable of transcending, reality with all of its rivalries, and to promote something that is beyond that. The big question, though, is then we don't want to leave peace to be a mystical idea. So then we need to somehow bring it back from the mystical world to reality with people who are not mystics, who are daily, So that's the challenge. The mystics, the Muslim mystic and the Jewish mystic and maybe the Christian one might find a common language. But then how do you translate it to CNN? I mean, to real politics. I wish I knew. But I'm not a mystic, so I can't tell you. But this is my understanding of your question. I hope I gave some answer.
Who are your favorite saints or models of faith?
Ooh. I mean, in our tradition, leaving aside the personal few people that I mentioned before, I think a lot about an American rabbi, Avraham Heschel.
Oh, yeah.
Heschel.
Oh, my gosh. You're right. What a great choice.
I mean, that was, every time that I read through his books, I
the prophets.
think, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a man that came from traditional Jewish upbringing, came to America, knew all of the Jewish denominations and the Christian ones there, in Manhattan.
Right.
And also marching with Dr. Martin Luther King. And when you read what he wrote, you just say, let's take the book and make it, and just take it to life. Like, how do we, if I could, so him.
I almost never preach on the prophets without looking at Joshua, Abraham.
I mean, seriously, about the Sabbath, about relationships.
Well, even be able to understand the kind of the psychology of prophetic action and prophetic speech.
And the fact that in the first page of his book, he says, the problem of religion is not secular.
Right.
The problem of religion is religion.
Yes, exactly.
You have to, if you're worried about the secular, don't blame the secular. Ask yourself, what in religion do you need to fix in order to be relevant, meaningful, spiritual,
faithful, kind, ethical. Yeah.
That's your question.
Yeah.
And you say, wow, because usually you say, oh, it's your job, it's your fault. And he was.
Yeah.
So that was...
Yeah, what a powerful 20th century figure.
Yeah.
Do you have a version of keeping kosher or lighting Sabbath candles?
Yeah, it's a nice version.
Yeah, oh, good.
Now, I have to tell you, speaking of my parents and our kids, we have 4 kids, my wife and myself. And they're walking their own path. So our oldest became more orthodox. And I knew it would come.
Yeah.
I knew a day would come that they would be rebelling against my middle way.
Right,
I learned it from you.
Yes.
Okay? And so my oldest daughter said, but Daddy, what's going on here? What are we? Are we that? Are we that? And I said, listen, first of all, I had the word for you. We're traditional. Okay? That's you can use the word. It will work for you. Second, every Sabbath looks the same in our home. It might not be theirs, but it has a self-integrity.
Right.
So it's not like every time we do something else. And the third, I told her, the rest is your job. I mean, you will do with your life and with the way that you forge your living, whatever is truthful for you.
Yeah, and you never know what part of it is going to be the. My son sang in the choir here, and he's singing in the choir in his church in college today. And my daughter taught Sunday school here, and she's teaching Sunday school in a different church in college. And I mean, I wouldn't have guessed that was what they would be doing.
Right.
But Okay, so here's another question. Some say a two-state system is not likely to last long with unsettled Palestinians. Is there a doable resolution to this? That's another tough question, too.
Wow. I have to tell you, I hope so.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a Zionist. I'm in the sense that I know we need a state.
Right, right.
But a Palestinian state is part of me being a Zionist, because I think they deserve the same rights and same space, the same ability to conduct their own lives, to be sovereigns, to be free. So these two dreams are connected for me.
Yeah.
It's a big, big question. How do we get there? How do we get there without endangering my dream? I don't want to be threatened.
Right.
I don't want to be insecure. And we see, and the Middle East is a very fragile place. And some countries that were much more solid than the Palestinians, like Syria, they collapsed.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy way, and there is no easy answer to that.
Yeah.
But I think basically and finally, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Palestinians want to start the negotiation on the 67 borders.
Mm-hmm.
The Trump peace plan begins with with Greater Israel.
Yeah.
Where's the middle way?
Well, two things. First, as I told you before, or as I said before, I'm happy about the plan because it brings in peace as part of the agenda.
Yeah.
It wasn't there at all. One. Whether this is a deal, I don't know. First of all, a deal is something that you create between two parties, and the other party has not joined yet for the deal. So it's more like a proposition for a deal, or a baseline on which the other side, if they want, would join, and then we would have a negotiation over some sort of a suggestion, like a starting point for a deal.
Right.
I don't know if that will happen. I don't know if our government will walk that way and the Palestinians will walk that way. So there are many things unclear yet. Because this is not a fixed, it seems to me, it's not a fixed package. It's the beginning of something. I'm still hoping that there will be peace, because again, it's not political. It's life.
Right.
It's the life of our kids. It's the life of my kids, of my Palestinian friend, all right, who's living a mile from me.
Yeah.
So it's not theoretical.
Right.
So maybe something in the wheels, the stuck wheels, is starting to move. I really hope so.
Yeah.
I really hope so.
What signs of hope do you see? As you look out in your own life and in your congregation and in your family and just in the region, I think it would have been hard to predict where we are now 20 years ago. And I wonder what signs of hope you see for the future, for like the next 20 years.
I see young people for whom the boxes I grew up with and in are much more diverse.
Yeah. So identity is more fluid.
I'm not sure it's more fluid, but it's more open. I don't want it to be fluid, like no borders, but there is more willingness to understand another side and to be influenced by someone else who might be secular or religious or Arab or Jewish or, so that. Yeah. I see that a lot. And from the ground level, you spoke before about hospitals. Okay.
Yeah.
In Jerusalem, you go to a hospital, there are Palestinians and Jews and Christians and Muslims working together in this. So when I go to these places, I say, wow, there is hope.
Yeah.
There is hope, because when it comes to life, like a hospital is a place for keeping us alive, then we know what is true.
Right.
It's true to cooperate.
Yeah.
It's true to live together.
Right.
It's true to get all our energies on the right, to do right. And these places, they are inspiring for me.
Yeah. I feel that way about you. We're so grateful that you were able to be here today. You do give me a sense of hope for the region and for all people to be able to live in peace.
Thank
and
you.
you're right, it has to begin with us, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So Rani will be our preacher at the 11 o'clock service. And, that's the reason we've got to wrap up exactly on time, because it's hard to have somebody ask you difficult questions and then to preach at the pulpit at Grace Cathedral where Martin Luther King
Resolution
Jr.
of the Palestinian question is not a
know.
difficult question.
You did a good job of trying.
I tried to answer without escaping from it. It is a big thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's not a simple matter. Next week, we'll be having Michael Murphy as our guest. He's the author of Golf in the Kingdom. He's more famously one of Eslen's co-founders. He'll be talking about the human potential movement. I can't wait for this conversation. I've been looking forward for a while. On February 12th, also, our Secenter, the Reverend Anna Rossi, is participating in Combatants for Peace, an interfaith workshop at the World Affairs Council, too. So she's doing some great work, and we're going to learn a little bit more about that. You're welcome to attend church, choral evensong at 11 o'clock, hear Rani's sermon. And if you can, please make a gift on your way out. And thanks again for Rani Jaeger for joining us today.